Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Marques, as Andre said. Andre, thank you for opening us up this morning and waking us up as well. As Andre mentioned, I'm the CEO of the Rideau Hall Foundation, and I'm also a proud board member of PFC. Je souhaite la bienvenue à tous ceux qui nous rejoignent, venus de tout le pays, pour nouer des liens, apprendre et échanger des idées. Je tiens également à remercier l'équipe de PFC pour l'incroyable travail d'organisation qu'elle a réalisé afin de rendre cette rencontre possible. I just want to take a moment to thank the team of PFC for curating such an incredible gathering for us today and such incredible, thoughtful content, so thank you. Yesterday evening was a really wonderful beginning of our time together, and I want to reiterate thanks to Elder Verna McGregor and Brian Jackson for starting us on this journey with a local welcoming filled with heart, history, stories, wisdom, and music as well. I am so pleased to be able to introduce this morning's plenary focused on the role of philanthropy in self-determination. Following the opening remarks of our very special guest, we'll be opening the floor to your questions. So you can submit questions anytime, starting now, on the Cvent app. It is live. By clicking on the session, scrolling down to the live Q&A section, and submit the questions dans la langue de votre choix. With that, please allow me to introduce our guest. The Mastercard Foundation urges us to imagine a world where everyone has the opportunity to learn and to prosper. With a mission to advance education and financial inclusion, the Foundation has been taking bold and innovative strides to make this vision a reality. The Mastercard Foundation started its work in Africa shortly after its founding in 2006, recognizing that Africa is home to the youngest, fastest growing population in the world, a young continent full of promise and potential. The Foundation's Scholars Program, launched in 2012, is a global initiative designed to develop the next generation of transformative leaders from Africa. Today, there is a community of more than 40,000 active Mastercard Foundation scholars and alumni, a community driving change in critical sectors like education, technology, agriculture, and more. In 2018, the Foundation embarked on its Young Africa Work Strategy with an ambitious vision of supporting 30 million young people in Africa, especially young women, to secure dignified and fulfilling work by 2030. To date, the strategy has supported 8.3 million young people into meaningful employment, with over 50% being young women and girls. In 2017, in the wake of the calls to action from Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the Mastercard Foundation created the Elevate program, a program with the vision of young Indigenous people living Bino Midwatsuwin, a good life in the Anishinaabe language. Elevate aims to support 100,000 Indigenous young people through education and on to meaningful livelihoods. Today, over 40,000 Indigenous young people have been supported across every region of the country through 48 partnerships, and I'm sure that's just the start. The Mastercard Foundation has proven itself willing to take risks and to be nimble and agile in its work. During the COVID-19 lockdown, the Foundation moved quickly to create and implement the Saving Lives and Livelihoods strategy to provide young people in Africa and Indigenous youth in Canada the tools they needed so they could continue their education. The Foundation then entered into a partnership with the Africa Centre for Disease Control to develop and distribute vaccines for the continent. This, the single largest non-governmental partnership in the history of Africa, moved the vaccination rate from 3% to 53% and growing. As I said, the Foundation is bold in its ambition and transformative in its impact. And certainly credit for that vision goes in no small measure to our guest speaker this morning. Reeta Roy has been the president and CEO of the Mastercard Foundation, really from the very inception, since 2008. Reeta grew up in Malaysia and was herself the beneficiary of scholarships that allowed her to complete her education. Many remarkable achievements and credentials have since followed. I ask you to join me in welcoming Reeta Roy. Veuillez vous joindre à moi pour souhaiter la bienvenue à Reeta Roy.
So Teresa didn't need the step, but I need it, so you can see me. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And thank you so much for the warm welcome. It is a real honor to be here, and let me start by saying congratulations to PFC on your 25th anniversary. In many ways, In so many ways, this could not be a more pivotal time for philanthropic organizations to come together. It is a tumultuous time in the world, with conflicts, climate change, divisions, inequity. And on some days, I think the narrative must seem very, very dark. And that's why philanthropy and this community must come together and offer the counter-narrative. Our work is complex, and it's also diverse. All of us work in different parts of the world. We work in different places, in different spheres, and we work in different ways. And yet, all of us, in some way, in some shape, are working towards the same goal, and that is the betterment of humanity, the improvement of people's lives. We're working to build strong and enduring institutions. And we are also, in doing this work, creating hope. I think I can say that all of us see, and many of us experience, these stories of hope and change. And that's why this time is an opportunity for philanthropy to cast light. It's also a time where we could do three things. First, we can make the invisible visible. We can co-create solutions with the communities and partners we serve, and we can find in ourselves the courage to strike the right path. And in each of these areas, we too will find stories which move us and stories which will inspire others. Philanthropy is called to make the lives of those we serve visible. All too often, people who participate in our programs are cast as victims, helpless, lacking. And yet we know this is nowhere near the truth. Making the invisible visible requires us to shift from a language of deficits to a language of assets. We can use language that illuminates the many strengths of the people we encounter who face great challenges. First, their innate understanding of the challenges, their own creativity to solve problems, their work ethic, their drive, their commitment. Few of us have had to live on $1 a day. Few of us have had to face a difficult choice of knowing which child to send to school and which one to keep at home to work. And while foundations like ourselves have resources, it is those participants in the programs we support who have the greatest asset of all. It's insight. Insight into how to solve problems. Now, they may not speak our philanthropic language. They may not serve up beautiful proposals with theories of change. And they may not provide us much comfort when it comes to risk profiles. But those insights are highly practical, in many cases actually impactful, and they hold the key to how we actually achieve results. One of our partners, Shining Hope for Communities, also known as SHOFCO for short, is an example that illustrates this point. SHOFCO was founded by a 14-year-old boy, Kennedy Odede. Now, he grew up in Kenya and in one of the largest informal settlements in Nairobi. It's called Kibera, and it is home to hundreds of thousands of people. As a child, Kennedy experienced unimaginable hardship. There was violence, drugs, near-death experiences. Life on the streets, as he's told me, was very, very tough. And yet this beautiful boy held on to a dream that he could make something of his life and that he could do something for his community. So SHOFCO began with a soccer ball made out of scrap to draw in other kids in Kibera. Today, SHOFCO is a sophisticated community-based organization, At its core, it provides a quality education for young girls in Kibera. But that core also serves as a hub to offer access to finance, digital literacy training for young people, clean water, healthcare, and legal aid for women. This is a community-driven organization that's powered by biometrics and the latest in terms of data analytics to be able to measure progress as well as anticipate emerging needs. So today, SHOFCO is indeed shining light on its community, and it is providing informal settlements across Kenya with hope. Kennedy has gone from being in Kibera to being named in Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. Here at home, we too can find wisdom, rooted in local knowledge. Last year, I was in the James Bay region visiting the Moose Cree First Nation. We're working with the Winnebago Health Authority to enable, prepare young people from Indigenous communities for careers in healthcare. And together, we are reimagining a healthcare system that embeds Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous worldviews. Now, this is where I encountered something quite extraordinary. So you have to know two things. It was February that I visited. And second, I grew up in the tropics. So this thing was absolutely magical. It was an ice road. So during the winters, as I learned, communities transform any body of water, lakes and rivers, into roads of ice, which transport food, fuel, and other necessities to otherwise remote communities. And I was just so stunned by the advanced technical knowledge that's required to create these roads. And for me, as I left, I thought that the ice road is a perfect metaphor about Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous technology, innovation, and harmony with the environment. It spoke to me about what we can learn, where we can learn, and who can teach us. This, too, is about making the invisible visible. In our experience at the Mastercard Foundation, we've found that it is really important to begin conversations by listening, especially to young people and those we seek to serve. They're best positioned to give us a first-hand understanding into their lives, into the challenges that they face, and into solutions that they want to offer up. In each of the countries where we work, we ask young people, what are your needs? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? And what are your ideas? Which sector of the economy is actually providing opportunity for growth for young people? Listening ensures success. It ensures sustainability. It certainly puts young people at the center of our work, and it helps us build trust with local partners. We call this way of working co-creation. It's how we strive at the Foundation to achieve impact. And our strategies, which Teresa mentioned, Young Africa Works and LAV here in Canada, are products of co-creation. It's a process that brings people together, and by people I mean educators, entrepreneurs, young people, other funders, community leaders, to help us identify and scale opportunities. We set targets together, and we measure progress together. So I can share one example. Within Young Africa Works, as you heard Teresa mention, we've set a very ambitious target of 30 million young people, especially young women, in dignified and fulfilling work. We know that jobs, or work, as we call it, is a great proxy for progress out of poverty. And so people often ask us, how do you know what is dignified work? The answer is, we don't. But that's why we ask young people to help us define what is dignified to them, to tell us what it means and to tell us what they value. And in interviews with thousands, actually 3,000 young people, they've told us that dignified work is work which provides a consistent and predictable income, which enables them to look after themselves and look after their families. It is work where they feel they can learn and grow, and work where they feel they are respected by their communities and in a position to give back, to contribute to communities. When we think about measurement in this light, we would never have gotten here without co-creation. It just brings new meaning to what we measure and how we measure. And it moves us far away from those rigid, fixed standards to something which is a living, breathing outcome. It also means reporting back to our partners and being accountable for how we work and to the communities which we serve. As I reflect on the journey of the Mastercard Foundation, I think of the many decisions we've had to make along the way about where we work, who we work with, and how we achieve impact together. You know, when we embarked on Young Africa Works and LOV, we had to ask ourselves, how will we execute? How will we deliver? And we chose to put ourselves close to community in the countries where we work. And that's why we came to this big decision to decentralize our operations. So we have, a sizable office and team in Toronto, and we also established offices in 7 countries in Africa to be close to our partners and to be responsive to them. This is a long-term commitment. It's a commitment to building relationships, building trust, but most importantly, to deepening impact. We also set a goal for ourselves that 75% of our partners in Africa would be African organizations. And similarly, 75% in Canada would be Indigenous organizations. And I'm pleased to report we're at 67%. So looking back, I've found that the pursuit of impact required courage. Courage to do the right thing, courage to take risks, courage to give it our all. It also required us not to be discouraged by what others would think and by what others might say. And so over time, we've built an organization with people from over 70 countries, representing every generation. Many of our colleagues have walked the journey of participants in our program. Some of them are former refugees. Some of them are graduates of the Mastercard Foundation Scholars Program. Some of them have lived their entire lives in Indigenous communities. But it is this diversity that gives us strength. So as I close, I invite all of you to consider how we as leaders can change the stories that we tell and how we can extend our influence through this work we call philanthropy. On a recent visit to Atlantic Canada, I really enjoyed learning about this generations-old values of gifting, sharing, and caring that are deeply ingrained across Indigenous communities. These traditions of reciprocity, mutual respect, mutual accountability have governed relationships for millennia. And this is also very true in many of the countries where we work and with many of the cultures with which we interact in Africa. I had the privilege of meeting the Mi'kmaq Grand Captain, Entel Denny. He's a remarkable man. He's an elder in Eskasoni. He was trained by the elders in Eskasoni. He's a leader. He's a knowledge keeper. He's also a lot of fun and a good sense of humor. And we got to talking, and I asked him, how does somebody become a Grand Captain? And he said, you must be worthy. And so I asked, what does it mean to be worthy? And this is what he said. It requires a life in service of others, doing the right things, taking the right action, putting people ahead of you and standing behind them. At gatherings, you are the first one to listen and the last one to speak. There's just so much we can learn from the Grand Captain. So in today's uncertain times, I think we can shine a light. We can make the invisible visible. We can co-create solutions with those who hold the greatest insights. And together, we can be bold and we can change the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Rieta, for sharing those very thoughtful comments with us and for setting the stage for a bit of a conversation. So I invite you now to feel free to pop questions into the chat. Some of you already have, so I'm going to see if I can figure this out. But you can also ask questions in very much an old school kind of way. I believe there are microphones around the room, and if there are not, I will bring you one if you'd like to put your hand up. So we'll start with Vinod. Let me just over here.
Thank you so much, Rieta. That was an incredibly nuanced and thoughtful presentation. Really appreciate it. My name is Vinod, and I'm the CEO of Future of Good. We're a leading media and learning organization enriching Canada's social purpose world with insightful journalism, research, and conferences. And on October 17th, we're actually releasing our first annual Top 50 Equitable Funders rankings, and it's full of juicy data and insights, so everyone should watch out for that. My question is about how leaders in philanthropy can create the conditions for nurturing viewpoint diversity in this pivotal era. As an example, when the Freedom Convoy occupied Ottawa, just the very streets behind us, just a couple of years ago, for about 7 weeks, there was a lot of anger, frustration, counter-protests. There was a lot of anger on all sides, and no one was listening. So at Future of Good, we decided to publish a special report on the effects of the Freedom Convoy on the social purpose world. And our journalists spoke to all kinds of people with vastly different perspectives and lived experiences, and we actually got into a bit of a trouble for talking to and listening to some of these folks. And the thing is people who work in the social purpose world generally are for all kinds of inclusion. More young people, more newcomers, more women, more more Indigenous folks, et cetera, and are generally welcoming and inclusive with all kinds of people, except people who don't believe in the same things we believe in. And according to the Edelman Trust Barometer, as you know very well, Canada is at risk of increasing polarization and division. So in this era of a poly-crisis and a poly-reckoning, there can be a lot of self-censorship in teams, and at times teams can turn into bubbles and monocultures of thinking. And you mentioned in your speech that we have to begin by listening. So as the leader of one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the world, how do you cultivate viewpoint diversity in your team? How do you nurture viewpoint diversity in your organization? And how do you empower staff to begin by listening?
Thank you for your question. These are indeed very difficult and complex times to navigate. I'll offer a few thoughts, and I'm sure there are many leaders here who are grappling with the same kinds of complexities who might have their views as well. I come back to our core value, the importance of listening. That's very, very key. And more than listening, actually inviting different points of view, different ways, different perspectives on a problem that may require all manner of multidisciplinary approaches to understand. I think part of one of the important roles of serving as a leader is also to set the environment and to set the tone for how we can have respectful and if I dare say, kind conversations with each other over very, very difficult topics, and to set certain rules. When I talk about rules, I mean certain boundaries of what it is to have a civil conversation, to express disagreement in a respectful manner. That is something so lacking in today's world. You know, you refer to the Freedom Convoy. I can think of any number of issues today, here at home in Canada and across certainly the countries where we work in Africa. And while many views have to be respected, what we're interested as, certainly as philanthropic organizations, is finding solutions, and in some cases experimenting with ways forward. And I think philanthropic organizations are in a very unique position, poised to help move, shift conversations to action. It does require courage to do this kind of work thoughtfully, but thank you. But no easy magic bullets here. Thank you.
Thank you. So the app is heating up. So, okay, so I'll start off. You mentioned the goal of the Mastercard Foundation in having support go to 75% Indigenous or locally led organizations. You also mentioned that you're at 67% now. This question comes from Sara Krynitzki. And can you talk a little bit about that goal from 67 to 75, and what do you see as either the major challenges in kind of closing that gap or opportunities?
So thanks for the question. I have to say that when we began, and before we shifted our whole operating model, we had set a very modest goal in retrospect of 25 or 30%. At the time, we were only working in Africa, and we could barely get to 21%. But being in the location, being in the countries where we are, it's enabled us to actually form relationships, identify other organizations. So getting closer has meant actually getting more knowledgeable and more aware. I don't foresee a challenge actually in surpassing 75%. So much of this is also just persistence, intention, and really understanding who is doing the work and who is getting work done.
Shifting to thoughts about just the experience that you've had in Canada and the experience on the continent. Given Canada's size and own cultural diversity, what are your thoughts about more centralized or decentralized models in Canada, as you've done with your Africa strategies?
Is there a little bit more elaboration on that question? Or
well,
maybe the person
who
asked
asked
the
from
question
Lars
can
Boggild.
help.
So, given Canada's size and cultural diversity, your thoughts about, well, I can perhaps take it in a bit of a different direction, and Lars, please jump in if I've misconstrued the question. But I'm really interested in learnings that are informing your work, both in Canada and on the continent of Africa.
So I'll take a crack at that. Thank you. Whether you decentralize or don't, maybe that's secondary. I think that's the decision every organization has to make, and there are trade-offs in any organization model that you pursue. The most important thing is, if you're not decentralized, to visit, to be present, to actually engage in the places or with the communities which you're most interested in working with, and to seek to understand, and to seek to appreciate the context in which they live, they work, and how they're trying to solve problems. And especially to listen to ideas which may seem completely counterintuitive. To me, that's where the focus needs to be. It's on that listening and on that engagement, regardless of operating model.
Thank you. Are there other questions? There are more questions in the chat, but I just want to be conscious of folks in the room. Yes, here. Oh, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Redsky, and so my question to you, just providing a little context. Years ago, I did a survey to ask individuals if they felt that philanthropy had a role to play with the truth and reconciliation? And a lot of people said absolutely. And when I asked what they thought some of the barriers were, a lot of people were afraid of making mistakes. And so what advice would you have based on your experience? Because I do know that 75% is amazing. It would be incredible if 75% of the philanthropic giving went to Indigenous communities. That'd be amazing. But it is at 0.008. So, you know, we have a long way to go. But what advice would you give to other foundations, you know, about taking that courage and moving those relationships forward?
I think many of us already know the answer. We have the answer inside. It's about really believing what you think, one, is the right thing to do, and second, what is right for your organization and for your foundation. So that's number one. The second thing, and it's been a painful lesson, certainly for me and for others at the foundation, is to realize that part of doing the right thing and part of finding your way is to make mistakes, and is to goof up periodically, and is to stumble and fall. And then to also realize, fortunately, in most instances, it's not fatal, but it's part of growing and part of understanding what it takes to do something well. You know, it's surprisingly for a community, and I speak for our foundation as well, our work is to give money away, yeah, and to only expect and hopefully intentionally plan for some impact. The very act of giving it away is in of itself, you know, it's not risk-free in terms of doing that, but we're so well positioned to take those risks, which many other organizations, many other industries for that matter, cannot take. And so I just encourage us, when you think about whatever problem it is you're focused on, whatever challenge which is your purpose or your mission, to think about the multivariate ways of solving that problem, and think about what's been tried and not worked, and what else, and there's a long list of other solutions out there, and what it is you want to get behind. And if you take that view that all of us, in many ways, are living experiments of how to solve problems. We're all in this giant lab called life, and we're trying to really find solutions. Those mistakes are part of learning and actually part of the way to solutions.
Rita, you spoke about the notion of reciprocity. This is my own question. I'm sneaking it in. And I'm wondering if you can share a bit more on how the Mastercard Foundation holds itself accountable to the communities that it works with.
Well, the communities are here, and they hope they will hold us accountable. So when I think about how we began the journey in Canada, it started with a lot of consultation with young people across the country. In fact, that's how we even came up with the name LaVie. That's how we came up with the focus on what a good life means. That's how we arrived at what it would mean to work with community, Indigenous organizations. I've learned so much about beginning in a good way, beginning with ceremony, learning to understand and appreciate the need to revitalize language, which is why language is a creative and constant theme in all of our programs across Canada with communities. So it's also a willingness to be influenced, to be led, and openness. It doesn't mean not asking questions, seeking to understand. It doesn't mean not setting out objectives about what it is we want to achieve, but it is being highly attentive to how we go about achieving it. So perhaps that's in our own small way, you know, our own expression of understanding these notions of reciprocity, mutual respect, and mutual accountability.
Thank you. Some questions from the floor, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Teresa. Hi, my name is Liban Abokor, and I'm with the Foundation for Black Communities. One of the emerging trends in the sector isn't to only recognize the insights of communities, but actually their solution-making capacity. And I think that I can't remember which foundation just commissioned some research around shifting capital toward community organizations or communities themselves to then think about long-term sustainable solution-making and, more importantly, giving the money away themselves. I'm wondering if MasterCard, given the massive assets that it has considered or is looking at a strategy where communities are actually going to be enabled with their re-granting capacity, both in Africa and I'm thinking hopefully in the long term, right here in Canada. I welcome that, your thoughts there.
Thank you for asking that question. So indeed, we have started programming where we are actually making gifts to community foundations, Indigenous community foundations here in Canada. In Africa, it's not been as straightforward, but what we have done is started to work with organizations which work with hundreds of young people, young entrepreneurs. We are a big supporter of community-generated, youth-generated ideas. And so we're doing that in an active way. We work with, there's an association which we helped fund together with the Rockefeller Foundation years ago, which is the African Philanthropic Forum, similar to PFC, to this community, very similar, to be able to actually spur that kind of thinking and to be led in many instances by communities, and especially by young people and the ideas that they have. So the legal form may be different, but the notion, the idea, the intent, and the outcome is the same.
Thanks, Liban. We have time for about 2 more questions. One that's heating up on the chat. You touched on it in one of your responses related to just the imperative for foundations, for those of us in the room, to be brave. But taking it a step further, what would you say, or what advice would you have to funders who may be reluctant to give up control or hide behind risk as a reason not to engage in community building, in reciprocal relationships?
First and foremost, I completely get that. And because we too are accountable to boards or to founders who have particular views. Yeah, so I think this requires a lot of conversation. And it certainly, for us, it took a year which led up to Young Africa Works, where we had to engage our employees, our board. We took a decision that year in 2017, I remember so vividly, to say, we will tend to our current programs across our portfolios, but we will not do any new programming till we come up with the strategy. We listened. We did a number of focus groups with young people across Africa. We met with leaders, we met with experts, we met with parents, we met with women, and they told us what they thought was the key issues. We came back, we had discussions with our board. So it takes tremendous engagement. So it's not as if you wake up one day and you say, hey, I'm going to do this, or we're going to do this. It takes informing yourself, educating yourself. But I think in that process, you become much more convinced, or you work with a sense of purpose about what is the right path to do that. It wasn't an easy process to make this decision to decentralize our business model. Many organizations, many other foundations said, you're nuts, you're crazy. And yet we knew we couldn't undertake this strategy without being present in the countries where we are. So all I can say is that take the time to really understand the challenge or the opportunity that you want to pursue, and then ask, when you're sure of the path or sure of the idea, then ask yourself, how will you do that? And in some cases, it might take shifting how you work. In other cases, it might take something else, partnering with a different type of organization or different types of allies. But, and once you do that, the magic is when you look back. It may seem radical to others at the time, but if you are so convinced it is the right thing to do, you'll do it.
I'm going to sneak in one tiny question. I'm getting the eyes from Andre. Rita, a theme this morning has been around just the boldness of the Mastercard Foundation in dreaming and in making things happen. What is your hope? What makes you hopeful?
What makes me hopeful are the people that I get to meet, the organizations we get to work with, who, I don't know where to begin, who are, in some cases, when you look at it from the outside, you think, gosh, this problem is unimaginable in terms of how we can solve it. And I'll give you an example. So in June, at the end of June, I was in Kakuma. Kakuma is a very large refugee camp in the northern part of Kenya. Today, Kakuma is going to become a municipality because the government of Kenya has made a very bold, progressive move in its policy. And it is really focusing on integration of refugees within the country. So when I was in Kakuma, which is a parched part of the country, when I say parched, I mean arid. And there's a huge settlement buzzing with economic activity. And as I was in the settlement, I met with government officials. So the mayor came to visit, and he said that that this particular location, if you were just to isolate it from rest of Kenya, it was growing, its GDP per capita, it was growing at 6%, which is unheard of. And he said it is because of the presence of refugees who have come here. It is their entrepreneurial energies, their ideas, their own innate ability to start up little companies. They are employing not just other refugees, but members of the host community. It was probably the most enlightened conversation we had about economic growth, integration, and seeing each other as people, not the other. That is the kind of stuff which gives me hope.
Thank you. I think we could probably keep talking for a few more hours, but I just really want to thank you for your time today and for being with us and for sharing your insight. So, round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
And I'm going to ask my colleague, Adjoa Boheni from the PFC Board of Directors, to join us on stage and close the session. Thank you, Rita. Okay. Yes.
Hi. So I don't really need this either. Thank you very much, Teresa, and of course, Rita, for your thoughtful presentation today. And I have to say, there's one thing we have in common from this year. I had the opportunity to do some work with the government of Nunavut in Baker Lake in February. One of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. One of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. And a ton of learning. As much as I gave, I think I received a ton more. And in particular, what I really appreciated about your discussion today, too, is that the root is of your philosophy, of your strategy, of the work that you're doing, is nothing about us without us. And I think that is critical, and it's a key shift that we're seeing more and more. So my name, I guess I should have started with my name again, is Adjoa Boheni. I'm on the board of PFC and was involved in the conference planning committee with other folks here in the room for this year's National PFC Conference. Along with several other leaders from the sector, the advisory committee of PFC helped shape and develop your experience at this conference. So if you like it, it was our doing. If you don't like it, it's all on Andre. It's essentially what we're saying. So my co-advisory committee members include Namendra Anand from the Zero Emissions Innovation Center, Kira Lapierre, Mastercard Foundation, Odée Bezail, Fondation J. Amand Bombardier, Marnie Pierce, Graham Book Foundation, Camille Legault, Fondation Choquette Legault, Kendall Quantz, Burns Memorial Fund. And so the winner of the PFC MVP Award, See, I told you not to give me a mic. So I know the team at PFC as well, I would like to say the advisory committee, worked hard with input from everyone and the members and partners from far and wide to design conference experience that combines learning, dialogue, collaboration, and connection to enable the philanthropic sector to further its role in advancing a just, equitable, and sustainable future. So on behalf of the advisory committee, I want to welcome you, bienvenue, and express my deep hope for an enjoyable, inspirational, thought-provoking time over the next couple of days. Thank you for being here and for participating with open minds and hearts.